But let's go into what we called human capital, but I'm renaming keep the team together. John Butler, how important is it to keep the original team together?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's really important, and I think it also does depend, kind of as I had said before. But I think having cohesiveness and having a long-term strategy is important, and I think having folks around who know the business well and have been with the business for an extended period of time is really important, because there's no way to really replace a lot of that institutional knowledge that sits between people's ears. That human capital is really important. And I think it's becoming more important over time in business, as we've seen.
Would you stress the keeping the team together into the new entity?
Absolutely. It's also important that in terms of the new entity, that everyone on the old team basically knows sort of what their path is going to look like, and that they have successors in place and so forth. And they're also incentivized to make sure that it works under the private equity firm sort of umbrella that they're going to work with. So, and I have to say, in terms of family businesses, just like families, as we all know, there's no family business culture that's the same. So it's a very, very unique situation.
I want to bring Stephen Malore into this discussion. From the legal standpoint, keeping the team together, are there legal issues that arise when you do that in one of these transactions?
So look, that's one of the key items in terms of putting that team together and making sure they're going to be there post-closing. And that's frankly getting the executive agreements, employment agreements in place and making that a item that is executed at closing, so you have continuity going forward, right? And knowing that management team will be there.
What about the culture integration with human capital? John, I mean, do you ever run into roadblocks? I'm pumping my fists together here because two different organizations, it's never 100% smooth, is it?
Yeah, I think that's the nature of the beast a little bit, that it isn't. But I think something that's really important is just the discussion and just getting on the same page up front and just having a shared vision. If you're going to do a deal with someone and you don't understand what the long-term vision is for the combined company, you're not getting off on the right foot, So I think there are transactions where, maybe there's an owner operator of a business that's being acquired who is selling the business because they no longer want to operate the business anymore. Maybe they want to go retire or do something like that. That's one, kind of segment of the population, or of the seller populace, I'll call it. And then there are other organizations where, they still want to be around and they want to be part of a combined company and have a long-term partnership. So I think it's again a little bit situationally dependent, but it's no less important in both situations.
Sean, I'm curious, how do you evaluate I don't like to use the word target, but a potential future partners and acquisitions culture?
Yeah, there's always the sort of this family business culture, what they want to present, other culture, or what they think it is, and then there is what it actually is. And some of the best ways to figure that out is obviously spend a lot of time and get to know management, senior management, and so forth. But that's one component. I have an investment professional that I know that will regularly just kind of go to the cafeteria of the company and kind of figure out, are they having these barbecues? Is there cohesion within the culture of the firm? And that's kind of an informal way of doing it. And there's also a much more formal way. It's looking at the minutes to prior board meetings. And sometimes it's not what's said, it's the absence of what's not said that can give you an indication.
Russ, how does Anshin assist in this evaluation of a private family business's corporate culture?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple things. One, purely on the valuation side, the numbers side of it is, we definitely get involved. We have a team that does that. But I think, everyone's kind of point about culturally fit is incredibly important. Adam, you made a comment of keeping the team alive and around for the period of time. I think understanding that culture is incredibly important. And I'll just say, on a personal experience, I've been involved on a number of transactions, both large and small. I used to work at MetLife, so MetLife, big company, right? Bob Ben-Moshe, he did a great job of bringing large teams together. And I think a lot of us that worked there took that into, this smaller entities and saying, hey, we want to make sure that culturally these organizations work together, because we know there's going to be a long-term tail to this transaction. And I think as Anshin is involved in these transactions, it really is important to not only do the financial side of the house, which is what an accounting firm tends to be involved with, but also, the other side, which is the human capital side, is incredibly important.
Yeah, I've always said that when you buy companies, you're buying IP, you're buying assets, and you're buying people, right? And you never really know what the culture's like until they're on board. And there's usually, one or two people in the acquired company they're just not buying in. They're not buying into the new culture. They're not buying into the new strategy. They're not buying into the new company. And you've got to make sure you deal with that very quickly, because they can poison the well for everybody else.
Stephen Milor, do you find what Steve Weinberger just said? Have you experienced that, situation getting, quote, poisoned?
Yeah, hopefully you find that out pre-closing, because the buyer will ask for employment agreements and non-competes. And for those folks who are at the seller who aren't sure or say, I don't want to work for a big firm or strategic, I'd rather, we were a nimble, startup kind of company. I'd rather, continue on that kind of path. This isn't the exit I had in mind. That should come to, for at the, during the transaction itself, right? So what typically happens is either that person doesn't go on board, and hopefully they're not a key employee. That creates an issue for the deal. Or if they are a key employee, that creates an issue for a deal. Probably getting some money for that key employee. There's probably going to be a special bonus pool where a portion of the purchase price, or it's a shared pain between buyer and seller, to make sure that they get this person on board post-closing.
How important is technology when we're talking about corporate culture? Because we have various and different technologies across the spectrum.
Well, it's essential, and we're on the people part of this discussion. And many of the companies that we've run into, family-owned companies, they have homegrown systems. And these homegrown systems generally have been built by one or two individuals within the company. And to Steve Milor's point, without these people, the systems will not run. I'm talking about your finance systems, getting your numbers out, your logistics systems, getting your products shipped, human resource systems. All of your business applications in a small company can be customized and maybe owned by one or two people. You've got to identify those people early on. And as Steve said, they may need an incentive to stay through the technology integration with the acquiring company. Because without them, IT is the blood running through a lot of these small companies.
Right.
People do matter. So it'll be important to identify the IT leaders and make sure they stay on board right through the integration.
John and Sean, let's wrap up. Let's go first with Sean with a final thought on this topic of the human capital and keeping team together.
Corporate governance, it has to be taken, into consideration a great deal. And, a business might have somewhat of a governance structure, but for it to operate at full potential, it needs to reevaluate that. And private equity firms are great. I mean, they know exactly what needs to happen, what the board composition should look like, and to have an engaged board that actually can help management and not be a hindrance.
John, your last thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just adding on to what Sean was saying, I think having an engaged board is really important. And I think, just having an engaged workforce generally is really important. And that starts at the top, right? So if you have an engaged board, you have an energetic, management team who instills a good culture, you're probably going to have a highly energized and enthusiastic and productive workforce, and probably a strong company from there. So I think the culture is really kind of the X factor, and it doesn't show up in the financial statements, but it's really important.
Well, want to thank everybody for joining us today. Sean O'Dowd, Jim Sharp, John Butler, Russ Saperstein, Stephen Milor, and Steve Weinberger.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks a million, and good luck with the rest of your day. Thanks for being with us. That's a great job.